My takeaway from this, by the way, is that a lot of the vulnerability arises from the fact that you've got a lot of people out there, millions with smartphones. Their decisions about what to do are going to have a huge impact on how quickly this spreads. And the question is, do we have the capability to communicate or even order people to do or not do certain things in order to tamp this down? Attorney General, you have any legal perspective on this?
Well, the Secretary of the Treasury mentioned the word quarantine. We don't have the authority in this nation to, as a government, to quarantine people's cell phones. So, so we're in uncharted territory right now.
Well, I'm actually shocked to hear that we don't have this authority. If this was someone with smallpox wandering through the Super Bowl, we would have the authority to quarantine them. And if we don't have the authority, the Attorney General ought to find it. The ISPs, the telcos, can tell people your phone is not going to work until it's been patched. We just need to find the authority to order them to take that action. And if they won't take it from us, then we have to go to the FCC and tell them they're no longer an independent agency. They need to take national security advice from this body.
Let me just make it clear. I'm not saying that there isn't an authority you could come up with, particularly if we make this determination here that this is an act of war. I'm just saying there is no off-the-shelf authority that lays out what you can and can't do in these circumstances, which I'm sure you understand.
For one thing, the President should be clear when he speaks to the American people publicly that the best thing they can do is to not use their cell phones, to stop.
On the military side, we have, obviously, Cyber Command has been stood up. It's been up for about a year now. What do you think that Cyber Command can do, first and foremost, in terms of the military area, but also more generally? Can Cyber Command help us defend here?
Well, from a Cyber Command standpoint, we can protect the government communication systems in the net, and we're doing that as we speak. As was alluded to earlier, we're not necessarily into the domestic side of this, although I think there's going to have to be a determination made at some point whether or not this is really an attack on our national security. And in that case, it's a policy decision.
Now, Madam Attorney General, could the President, is an option for the President to say this is an act of war, it's an attack, maybe from a state, maybe from a non-state actor, and I'm going to license Cyber Command, at least temporarily, to use all of its capabilities to defend the country, or is that going to get us in trouble somehow?
Well, if the predicate is there for a finding that this is an act of war, yes, the President can act as Commander-in-Chief, and he can task the Department of Defense to use the tools at its disposal. I have to tell you that, as I said earlier, we are operating in a bit of uncharted territory, as you know.
You know, I want to just ask Councilor Lockhart, as we turn to this issue of how do we restore and respond and mitigate. You know, you're the President's counselor. We're talking about some pretty strong medicine here involving the military, involving telling people to turn their phones off. How is this going to play out from the standpoint of public reaction? What are you concerned about?
I'm concerned about what he does in the first instance here, because that will set the tone for moving forward. I think the President has to, despite all of his instincts, to reassure people, not undersell this. The worst thing he can do in any of these instances is take a step and have it be ineffective early, because he'll be impotent as far as the public going forward. So he's got to define this as a major crisis. He's got to define this and take whatever power he's legally able to do. That's what the public expects, and politically, that's what we have to do. I think he's got to answer a couple of very important questions, which is, you know, are we safe? Are we subject to a military attack that's different than a cyber attack? And I think those are areas where he can really be strong. And I think he can overwhelm people with information about what's being done, you know, just detailing a laundry list. I don't think we should be telling people to turn their phone off, because guess what? People won't. And then the story will be the President of the United States can't even get his constituents to turn their phones off. You got to go it from the other end, which is if phones have to go off, you've got to turn them off for them. And then you've got to give them a justification and a reason. This is an attack on the United States. It may not be a bomb, but it's much more significant than a bomb going off as far as the quality of life in this country and the broadest and starkest terms.
When we come back, who's behind the attack? Could be a terrorist, could be a hacker, could be a private citizen or a group of private citizens who are just out for mischief.
We don't have the authority in this nation to, as a government, to quarantine people's cell phones.
You got to go it from the other end, which is if phones have to go off, you've got to turn them off for them.
The initial reaction I heard around the table was, we ought to ask people to cooperate, we ought to ask for information, we ought to ask people to turn their phones off. But as the discussion has developed, what I'm starting to hear, and I think, Joe, you summed it up, is we can't ask, we're going to have to tell. Because the bigger danger is not that we're going to offend people, but that we're going to seem ineffective. And that ineffectiveness will cause a crisis of confidence. So are there different views about that? Because I'll tell you, I'm inclined with Joe on the more kind of tough end of the spectrum. Yeah, Mr. Secretary.
I have no quarrel with acting decisively and doing things for people, making their decisions for them in this regard. But I do think that we need to be careful about talking about acts of war and attributing this situation to foreign powers before we really have definitive information that that's the case. Not only just because we need to have the necessary information, but we also don't want to make adversaries or enemies out of countries that might, in fact, be able to help us.
On the one hand, what I'm hearing from the Attorney General is, if we can characterize this as an act of war, we can be effective and energetic in doing the limit of our capability to take care of the situation, and that's what Councilor Lockhart said. On the other hand, if we say it's an act of war, we're going to have to tell people who the actor is. That's going to get, the State Department is obviously concerned about making unfounded accusations and having people accuse us of wrongly fingering the person who's carrying this out. But if we don't declare an act of war, then, as the Secretary of Homeland Security says, we're stuck. We're in a request, don't tell mode. So first I'm going to ask the DNI, do we have any hope of getting the kind of proof that we need to satisfy everybody in the hours that we have to make this decision?
This could be a state actor, and we have 3 or 4 candidates just based on past practice and what we know. It could be a non-state actor. It could be a terrorist, could be a hacker, could be a private citizen or a group of private citizens who are just out for mischief. We're pretty good at locating the origin of such attacks, but that doesn't give you attribution, because unlike a conventional arena where you can locate an army and you can attribute it to a state, we may locate this attack in some country, but citizens of another country could be using that location, that building in that city to carry out this attack. But at this point, I cannot tell you that what we know about attribution allows us unambiguously to say this is an act of war. I would also add to the point that someone made about the video, we may learn that that video is significant, but typically in these attacks, people try to disguise their hand. And so the video of Russian troops and so forth strikes me at this point as more of a diversion.
Although it could also be a double diversion.
It could be a double diversion. It could be playing on the knowledge that we look at these things as a diversion. So,
well, that's true. Yeah, Secretary Treasurer. Yeah.
I think if we think about this conventionally, we're going to tie our hands behind our back, and only the president has the ability to bring the perspective of how we're looking at this. So whether it is a foreign state, a known terrorist organization, or someone sitting in their mother's basement, let's focus on the effect, not the cause. Yeah. The effect is an act of war. You turn off everybody's cell phone, you don't allow them to bank, work, communicate. The effect is an act of war. And I think if we focus on that and not think about it the way we normally think about these things, we give ourselves some room to move, which is all we really need now. We will make the substantive decisions, we will follow the law, but right now, the biggest issue we have is defining the problem and just letting people know that we're on top of it.
I've just been told there's an important new development, and we'll put the news on the monitor so we can get up to date.